Just what if, instead of rebooting everything with the DC Universe and James Gunn and Peter Safran overseeing everything, what if DC and WB decided to stick with the Snyderverse and produce Black Adam sequels, Aquaman sequels, a Man of Steel 2, and potentially even bring Zack Snyder back? That's what we're going to tackle in this video. Okay, so there's a couple of rules I need to lay down for how this works. We are picking up with the release of Black Adam. And what we are removing is James Gunn and Peter Safran. They are not a factor in. What's happening is that we're in a world where they never formed DC Studios. But what happens is David Zaslav continues the trek to fully commit to the DCEU and everything that was in development. And some of this will have to factor into the fans and what was reportedly being discussed behind scenes by higher-ups. So we're now in a position where the ending of Black Adam clearly establishes that Superman will go toe-to-toe with Black Adam in some film down the road. Now, this is important because we're definitely coming back to this in a major way. And the rest of the release schedule follows through pretty much the same way it did. Shazam is released, and without knowing that this would be the end films for the entire universe, the box office, in my opinion, would have been a little bit better. The film made $134 million worldwide. I think had they not announced that the universe is dying, this film could have pushed through to at least 175 to 200 million. Not a success because, well, let's be real, it wasn't gonna be a success. And with a budget of $125 million, it still would have been a failure, but just not as big a one. Enough that the character will come back, just not in a sequel. We then jump to that summer where we get the release of The Flash. Most of the film plays out pretty much exactly the same. But you gotta remember, the old plan is in motion. AKA the ending scene, which of course in the final cut includes George Clooney's Batman as the new Batman of this universe. It is, as intended, Michael Keaton's Batman, who's now the new Batman. Now, the film in its entire box office run made $271 million. I think it could have pushed to about 350 had, again, it not been made explicitly clear that nothing is happening with this character going forward, and if they revealed that Keaton was in fact this universe's Batman, because this factors into the fact that Batgirl was not canceled in this timeline. This film was set to release in a hybrid HBO and theatrical limited release. It was made for $90 million complete. The idea was to pick up right after the events of The Flash and establish the new DC universe through the point of view of the new Batman, Michael Keaton, and of course, Batgirl. The film, I say, would have made maybe 100 million tops, but again, it's a hybrid release and it's here for a specific reason. With a budget of $104 million, making 130 in its box office run, I think Blue Beetle would have fared a lot better. People knowing that it's a new universe, this film getting great traction, I don't think it would have been a massive billion-dollar hit, but I could see this going up there in around 175 to 200 million, and being critically and, of course, commercially just received well enough that the action figures and merchandise and everything made it break even. Of course, digital and Blu-ray sales and all that would have helped. This would have been a hit. And then, of course, we got to end everything we knew was coming with Aquaman 2, aka Aquaman The Lost Kingdom. With a budget of $215 million, it managed to make $439 million. I think had everything still played out and everybody knew everything was in continuity, Michael Keaton's Batman shows up, this film, I think, could have been a successful 475 to 500 million. Thus, Aquaman 3 would have happened. But now this is where we get into the section that's more or less like fantasy booking. So if you guys remember, Charlize Theron was announced to be executive producing a DCEU series spinning off of Aquaman based on Aqualad. We don't really have the full details on which version of Aqualad, maybe it could have been both, but I think this series would have happened as a limited series. It would have been cheaper, like a high-end CW series like Superman and Lois, but I think it happens, and, well, you get one and done. I also assumed that series would have set up Black Manta as the father of Aqualad, and this would have brought us into the Trench film, a low-budget horror film at the bottom of the ocean featuring the Trench creatures. Next up, as it was about to start production before being shut down, the Green Lantern TV series, which was supposed to be way more high-budget and Green Lantern than what we're getting from James Gunn and Peter Safran, would have definitely hit. That would have been something that could have been make it or break it. But at the same time that this was hitting, we also know that DC was in production and already had lined up at least 6 different directors for the first 6 episodes of Adam Strange's Strange Adventures, an anthology series that opens up and bookends with Adam Strange, but also we know one episode was a live-action interpretation of Bizarro in the DCEU, directed by the one and only Kevin Smith. He confirmed that this series was canceled when DC Studios was formed. Now, while we don't got full details on what's going on, it's pretty much unanimously believed that Man of Steel 2 would have been the Man of Steel versus Black Adam. And this would have been like a giant confrontation where more or less nobody wins. They're kind of evenly powered. And Henry Cavill would have been back, of course, to star as Superman fighting The Rock, because this was just step one of the bigger picture of building out Black Adam as the ultimate bad guy. Because we know Zack Snyder was being considered to be brought back by somebody higher ups to continue working on the Snyderverse. And they were positioning Black Adam as sort of a stopgap in the DC universe to fight the Justice League before we got to Justice League 3, aka The New Gods. And in case you forgot, The New Gods was a film that was announced and in development, being worked on by Ava DuVernay. Ultimately, it was also scrapped when everything came crumbling down. Despite the disaster that was Wonder Woman 2, a third film was still going to happen, and it was only James Gunn and Safran that put a stop to it. So a third Wonder Woman that sounds like it would have been modern day was literally set to go, but that was canceled. I think this film would have come out. It would have done better than the second one, not as good as the first, still would have been a bomb. And even with all that in mind, we know that even Zack Snyder's goal was for Justice League 3 to essentially be set up for the ultimate reboot, and Crisis on Infinite Earths was a project in development. They've all confirmed this. That was the end goal. It would have been at the point of more or less no return. We can't keep this universe going. We realize we screwed up from the beginning. We're now setting up the reboot. This would have been the big blow-off of everything. And by all accounts, it would have only been a handful of years after Black Adam. So everything we just talked about would have come out in about the span of, well, ending right around now, if you really think about it. The box office for this, I think, would have been interesting. I could see $1 billion because they would have thrown money at everybody and anybody to be in it. But ultimately, it's a film that would only exist to freshly reboot everything and get everything streamlined under one roof. And the point I'm trying to make here is, even if the Snyderverse and the DCEU continued, they always had an endpoint in sight. And with the diminishing box office and reception, they went the correct route. Because if you look at everything I just said, everything would have been diminishing returns to a final blow-off that would have ultimately been a death blow to the entire universe as intended, you know? So, yeah, I think they really just made the right choice, if I could be real with you. And ultimately, what we could have had, I don't think is better than what we have now. Thank you for checking out that video, and thank you for your continued support. Feel free to like, share, subscribe, do whatever you will, and if you're so inclined and would like some additional content from us, which includes unfiltered content and bonus discussions, we do offer exclusively in our member section. We hope to see you there. So thank you for watching, and have a good one.